We all know that family law cases can be complicated, which is why you and your client deserve reliable, hassle-free drug and alcohol testing services. From hair testing to abstinence monitoring, we can help. Visit lextalks.co.uk for more information.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Family Lawyer podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Grant Cameron, family lawyer, mediator, collaborative lawyer and a partner at Trethowans, and importantly for the purposes of today's discussion, the immediate past chair of resolution. Fantastic to have you on the podcast, Grant. Thanks so much for joining.
Hello, David.
Unaccustomed as you are to public speaking, we're going to talk today about some of your reflections of your past 2 years as chair of the organisation. It's been a really interesting period of time. We're, of course, still working our way through the impact of no-fault divorce, which was a humongous kind of achievement, both for resolution and for the sector, but also thinking about what the future looks like as well. We were just chatting before we started to record about imperatives that are in and around family law. And at some point during the discussion, I'm going to hand you a magic wand as well to see what you could conjure up. But in the first instance, perhaps you might share a little bit about your background. Who are you and what do you do?
As you've said, David, I'm a family lawyer. I've been doing this work now sort of well over 30 years. And very early on in my career, I specialised in family, almost to say from sort of the moment I qualified. I've really enjoyed the challenges that the sort of family law work produces. I've dealt with legal aid work. I've dealt with private client work, also private law work. It's been a really varied career. And obviously, as that career has developed, so are the areas of practice within it, the sort of areas that I deal with. It's been, say, I've no regrets, put it that way. I'm glad I sort of stuck with family sort of from get-go.
Your term in office as chair of resolution finished in May. I wonder if you might share your thoughts on that period of time. You followed Juliet, who unusually served 3 years because it was interrupted by COVID. And I guess you were still, in some respects, coming off the back of COVID a little bit as well.
Absolutely. So you've mentioned Juliet, and she did an absolutely amazing job sort of steering the organisation through 3 tricky years. I mean, I think the first year, none of us knew what we were doing as practitioners as much as how the organisation would sort of develop. So as I say, she did an amazing job. But then when I took over from her, obviously we were in that aftermath. We were making sure that membership numbers stayed up and that our members, most importantly, felt really supported because, of course, the way that we were all working had changed quite a lot. Suddenly we were home working, not just initially, obviously, it was all the time, but even once people started to edge back into an office environment, we had to then manage sort of expectations. And it was really important that our members felt supported, that they could access resources, whether that be training resources or getting hold of sort of a resolution staff member sort of over the phone to sort of raise queries or deal with sort of any issues they might have. So the organisation really did go through quite a sea change. In that sort of first phase, once sort of COVID had struck, our communication team at Resolution were absolutely amazing. They produced e-bulletins so that it was a way of connecting with the members throughout that period. But then that led on to making sure we still publish now sort of regular e-bulletins with all key developments or news, big or small. And I think members have really sort of welcomed that touchstone, knowing that HQ are making sure they're fed with all the relevant information and say training events or social events, whatever's going on in sort of up and down the country, but also the bigger changes, which I'm sure we'll touch on, things like cohabitation reform, what work's going on behind the scenes, code of practice and the year of the code really becoming a sort of central point this year and something, again, we'll refer back to, I'm sure. But it's, as I say, been a really useful way of just making sure that our members feel connected. because for them, obviously, they may be working as sole practitioners or in a small practice. So to be able to reach out to fellow members, either their neighbouring region or their own region, neighbouring regions, or up and down the country, it's really valuable. So I think that's been a real sort of important element of sort of how it started, if you like. And as I say, whilst I wouldn't want to take the credit, that was very much sort of the bedrock of what I took over after I sort of took over from Juliet, that sort of line of communication really being sort of maintained.
And for the uninitiated into what life is like as a chair of resolution, can you talk us through kind of the structure of your time in the role? I mean, for starters, it must be a humongous undertaking, both for you personally and professionally, but also the firm as well, in allowing you to go and do something quite so high profile.
You're absolutely right, David. And first and foremost, I'd like to say, well, a big thank you to Trethowans, because they were super supportive. There was an opportunity for profile raising for the firm, but they also appreciated in doing that, there was going to be sort of a lot of time away from the office, traveling sort of around the country, attending events or functions. So there was that sort of time sort of demand. I also have to say I had a hugely supportive wife who sort of, I think, saw less and less of me over the last 2 years. Now I'm back at home, I think she's probably rather wishing I may disappear again. She's saying you're at home far too much. But there were great opportunities. So I think from that point of view, there were demands, and I continued, even though I took a smaller caseload and I had sort of a fantastic team around me who gave me a lot of sort of support and made sure that things just kept moving in the right direction. It did mean that, yes, I had to be away from the office and, as I say, traveling around and perhaps just jumping in on that. One of the things when I took over as chair that I thought was really important, and again on the back of sort of COVID, was actually being able to get out and about to our various regions, which span right up sort of Preston, Lancashire at the top end, right down to Devon and Cornwall at the bottom end, and sort of everywhere in between. And both myself and the sort of now new chair, Melanie, we really wanted to sort of connect with the regions. But to do that, we knew that we would want to go and visit them. It wasn't going to be sufficient just to sort of have a phone call. So we've been jumping on a lot of trains. I don't think I've seen as much of the country as I have in the last 2 years. And it's been, and I've used this phrase so much in the last 2 years, what a privilege to meet various members who have done an amazing job, both as resolution members, supporting their clients within their firms, and particularly in challenging circumstances. And I say it's been a great honour to be able to go out to the regions to find out from them what really matters. And everybody has different experiences. For some, it will be sort of the fact that they're concerned how sort of there's delays in the court system, or the lack of legal aid funding and how that impacts their clients. We've come across a variety of issues. There's no way that we've been able to address all those issues, but importantly, I hope that the members know that they've been able to speak to us, they've been heard, and that we will do everything in our power to make sure other powers that be will become aware of sort of those concerns. So it's just made it very vocal. And I think that's one of the great parts of the organisation, is it's not just been a membership organisation that stays very silent, but it's really active in the lobbying, in the sort of pressing for change. And those opportunities, we've really seized them every given opportunity we can to make sure the organisation remains relevant, importantly for our members. But I think as members, what we also would say is importantly for our clients and the families that we look after, because that was really how the sort of organisation started way over 40 years ago, making sure that families and children within those families were treated sort of with greater respect, greater dignity, and to actually sort of deal with matters in a much more sort of holistic approach.
You talked there about the organisation, continuing to do its work. Was there a risk that in the wake of no-fault divorce, and obviously that was a really sizable achievement from Resolution's point of view, that the organisation could end up in some sort of identity crisis? It had gone hell for leather at this and achieved it. Was there any risk that, it wasn't quite sure where it was going to go next, or did you have a role in forming where it was going to go next? And clearly that's sort of in the direction of cohab, isn't it?
When I took over in 2023, it was the same year that the Resolution's vision for family justice was published. Now, the vision for family justice, if you like, was Resolution's manifesto. And within that manifesto, there were some real key aims. And you and I have both just touched on cohabitation reform, and that was one of those key aims. But there were various other aims as well, ensuring that clients got sort of early legal information and advice, continuing to lobby for sort of improved rates and support within the legal aid sphere, both from the solicitor or the professional point of view, but also from the clients. So there was some other directions. And I would say, no, there was never, from my point of view, a risk that the organisation had achieved something huge. I mean, no fault divorce, a significant development. But already members were starting to think about the what next. So it wasn't like we had no fault divorce and then what next. That what next process had already been underway. And cohabitation reform sort of has been one of those drums that's been banged for a long, long time. And I have to name him. There's a chap called Graham Fraser, and he's been so instrumental in sort of cohabitation reform work. Not just him, he has a great committee. They're very much supported this call for change. But it's individuals and committees like that that have made such a difference. And as I say, all that thought processes were taking place long before sort of no fault divorce came in. So I think that's the other great thing about the organisation. There's always a search for the what next. The family law world is changing. The family formation and structure of families is changing. So the organisation always wants to stay ahead of the game to making sure, as I say, individuals, members, families, children are all supported within that network. So the vision was an absolutely fundamental bedrock. And so it's been a useful sort of touchstone from me in the last 2 years, but also for our committees and our members generally, because then it's sort of go-to document to say, okay, what are we doing about this, that and the other? And it's sort of a real central place and central point.
On a professional level, do you believe that no fault divorce achieved what it set out to, or are there unintended consequences of the legislation that we didn't sort of see happening, or what was your view on it?
Vacancy Legal Recruitment, a refreshingly unique and personal talent agency developed specifically for legal. Dedicated to the sector and with extensive experience working across legal services and legal technology, we bridge the gap between your requirements and top-tier legal talent. Get in touch today and say hello at vacancy.co.uk.
I think on professional point of view for me, I've obviously seen it led to huge sort of improvements. As a practitioner of a number of years, it was quite soul destroying sometimes having to draft up a behaviour petition where you really would be bringing out sort of all the dirty laundry and sort of putting it into a document. And then you would try and sort of say to either your opposite number or within to your clients, okay, well, we've now dealt with the divorce. We now need to look at the arrangements for the children, or we now need to sort out the finances. Let's try and do that in a sort of setting of trying to negotiate, trying to reach an agreement. When you'd seen in paper some quite sometimes heavy allegations being made just to get the divorce to go through. So I think I am aware that some practitioners have heard comments from perhaps their clients where they said some clients had found it quite cathartic to be able to put the sort of the stuff down on paper. And I understand that it was a sort of way of being able to sort of release some of those things that they'd encountered. And it was a way of sort of managing that. And I don't criticise that in any shape or form. I understand that from an emotional point of view. But I think where divorce is a process, to get it to go through a sort of no fault sort of mechanism so that actually you can get that process done and then you can focus on what really matters, and that has to be things such as how can we sort out the arrangements for the children that sort of is beneficial to them, beneficial to the parents, and sometimes the wider family, or looking at the financial arrangements without having to sort of go through hopefully months and months and months of sort of dealing with financial disclosure, then negotiations, and then hopefully coming to an outcome or ultimately leaving it in the hands of a judge to sort of impose a decision. So the quicker we can get on with the things that really matter and support our clients in that, to me, that's key. So I think the no fault divorces for me was a good trigger point, because actually we didn't have to worry about something a little bit more fundamental. It's sadly, if individuals or a couple have come to the decision their marriage is at an end, then it seems right to me that the process should support them in that, and there shouldn't be recriminations and sort of making it difficult. It should be something that's sort of managed and, as I say, really focus on the all important issues.
So if resolutions sort of next big thing is cohab, 2025 is also the year of the code. Perhaps you might expand on that, please, Grant.
If I may, David, and if bear with me, it's going back a little bit in time. As I say, over 40 years ago, John Cornwall and 30 lawyers decided that the practice of family law should be done differently. At that time, it was part of the sort of civil litigation sphere, so it was all about sort of negotiation, a level of posturing, certainly cost would be run up. And actually, the people that got lost along the wayside, I think, were the clients, and very importantly, their children or the extended family. So John Cornwall and these pioneering other solicitors said this should be done differently, and they created the Solicitors Family Law Association, and then on the back of that, some years later, that became Resolution. And what we moved from then was not just a band of family lawyers, but family law professionals, so involved financial advisors, family consultants, barristers, mediators, a sort of much wider sort of pool of those involved in family justice. Within that, then the code also got sort of, if you like, first of all born and then sort of developed. And the code is absolutely instrumental for any Resolution member who really believes in the organisation, who wants to make a difference to the practice of family law, who wants to support their clients and to sort of be able to deal with their opposite number in a fair and sort of reasonable manner. Then the code is absolutely fundamental in that, sort of putting the needs of the children first, dealing with matters in a respectful, dignified manner. A client very recently said to me when I met her for her first appointment, she said, myself and my husband, we don't love one another anymore, but I want to deal with everything fairly. And then she hesitated and then she said, I just want this to be kind. And actually that has really stuck with me, that word, kind. And again, it wasn't about posturing negotiation. She doesn't want just to walk away with nothing. She wants a fair outcome for her, but also as far as her husband at the moment is concerned, and also their children. But I thought for me that word kind really resonated. And I say it stuck with me over the last few weeks about actually that's one of those fundamentals within the Resolution Code of dealing with matters in a respectful, dignified and kind manner. I get no pleasure either receiving, or at least I hope not sending out letters that are very sort of acrimonious, that sort of leads to tensions between the lawyers. It almost becomes personal, but I'm not actually sure you get a better outcome from all of that. I'm sure there are certain clients that like that level of sort of animosity. I have to say it's not me. It's not certainly my experience of other Resolution members. And for the majority of my clients, it's not what they want either. They want to get through this process as painlessly as possible. Because I think from a client's point of view, this is a major life-changing event. They're going to have all sorts of challenges, all sorts of questions, all sorts of things they're facing. So if they know that they've got a lawyer who is dealing with matters in this respectful fashion and who really adhere to the code and say, so the code going back in time as they was sort of developed, and the year of the code, I think from our point of view, and it was really a comment that Juliet made at the conference where I took over as chair, she was talking about sort of the importance of language, the importance of what we put in letters, and should we sometimes think before we press send. It's on the back of that, we suddenly thought we need to perhaps re-emphasize some of the important elements of the code. But this year we haven't treated it as a strap line. It's underpinning everything we do. So there will be various activities that some of the regions have put on. It will be some of the work that takes place at National Conference, but not just as a piece of an isolated piece of work. It's really trying to refresh our members' minds about what does the code say, how important it is, and it's a bit of a refresher. As practitioners of many years, and me included, I would say it does no harm to revisit that. I'd go as far to say I think it would be good for all members after a certain number of years of sort of practicing family law to do a refresher course on the code in practice. Our new members have to undertake it, it's a mandatory requirement, but I think it'd be good for all of us as members to go through some sort of refresher, because it's easy to fall into bad habits. You don't necessarily develop those bad habits, but what might start as a sort of throwaway line in one letter you suddenly find you're repeating that in other correspondence. And then you can find you're edging away from some of those fundamental principles that John Cornwall was rightly so proud of when the organisation as the SFLA started, and resolutionists sort of have rightly held on to and are sort of proud to shout it from the rooftops now.
We've touched on the culture of law in previous podcasts, so I don't particularly kind of want to go down that route, Grant, but what we're talking about here is changing the way in which people think about family law, changing, as you said, the language. We don't talk about our opposite numbers in a negative tone. No. We're talking about collaborating with people. One of the really interesting things I find about the direction of travel in family law is this collaborative approach that you've referenced, where we're bringing in experts. We can't expect the family lawyer to be an expert in pensions for the sake of argument. So we're starting to bring in experts to support our clients in the things that we as professionals aren't expert in.
Often with my clients, when I first meet with them, I usually use a picture of a triangle. And I said, if they're in this situation where sadly they're separating, going through the divorce process, I said that triangle's represented by sort of three sides. You've got the legal, and obviously when they come to us for advice, that's what they're looking for us to sort of skid them steer on. So you've got the legal side. On the other side, you've got the financial side, so the input of financial advisors, either helping parties collate this information, because for some people that in itself is challenging. They may have not, during the year of their years of marriage, been particularly responsible for the finances. So that can be a real challenge of how they collect all the relevant information and pull it together. So that's my second piece of the triangle. And the third piece of the triangle, I think, is the all important, and I always treat this as the base. It's the emotional support, and that's what our sort of family consultants and therapeutic professionals add to this triangle. Because if you deal with the triangle, but you don't have a solid base, you're not focusing on the emotional side, then there's a risk the triangle just collapses in on itself. But you're absolutely right, David. I'm not an expert in those fields. I can see when a client may need a pension report. I can see when a client may be struggling emotionally and sort of being able to signpost them to get the sort of support that they need. But I think it's really important right from the outset that clients know that having input from other professionals, whether it be a financial advisor, pension expert, the accountant, therapeutic professional, it's really, really important, because it then starts to address those sort of issues on sort of those three quarters. Now, I've been practicing as a collaborative law practitioner for some years. The areas of work that I do, I find it one of the most rewarding, sort of being able to sit round the table with another solicitor who, of like mind, wants the clients to find a constructive solution, but also to have the clients as part of that discussion. This is about them. It's not about me or the solicitor on the other side. This is about those individuals, their children, their extended family. So giving them a platform where they can help structure creative solutions, but also within the sort of confines of knowing that they can draw on this additional support, the financial support or the emotional support, is really important. I'm also very lucky to be a member of an organisation in Hampshire called Hampshire Family Legal Solutions. It's a sort of spin-off from collaborative law, because within the foundation meeting of the group, clients are introduced very early on to a financial neutral and a family consultant. You basically have a sort of fixed cost meeting, and those clients will meet with the sort of two lawyers, but also these other professionals. It's not to give tailored advice, it's to set the scene. And I have to say, sometimes clients can be a little skeptical. They say, oh dear, this is going to be a bit of a sort of money spinning exercise. Are we really going to see the benefit? My experience is at the end of that, clients have been completely sold, because they've really appreciated the value that the family consultant and all the financial neutrals bring to the table. And I think it's most noticeable with the family consultants that their role, often they're the unsung heroes. What they're actually doing is helping clients in their lines of communication, diffusing what could be potentially really quite destructive arguments, helping them to take time out, and sometimes actually working a little bit with the lawyers as well, because as much as we'd say we don't get too personal on it, it's easy to get drawn into certain scenarios. And actually sometimes the family consultant will be able to sort of lift everybody out of that situation, sort of recalibrate. And I think their role is key. But as I say, financial neutrals, also helping clients pull the information together, helping them to understand that information, signposting them to the right sort of pension expertise so that we don't go down rabbit holes, that we can keep clients focused, help them come up with solutions, creative solutions that are really important from them. And it's very much part of the world we now find ourselves in. Non-court dispute resolution. For me, it's a key part of the way I practice, and it's a key element of the way that the family law team in Trethowans practices. But it's also up and down the country. There's a greater expectation, almost requirement now, that sort of all forms of NCDR, whether it be mediation, arbitration, collaborative law practice, be considered. And again, for me, that's all important. I think it's so key to make sure clients know there are options, there are choices. Court isn't the one sort of size approach for everybody. And in fact, if I can steer clients away from the court, I'd much rather do so, because I know that there's a financial implication, a time implication, but also very importantly, an emotional implication. It's a big cost from a client's point of view. And I think keeping matters out of the court as much as we can, we owe it to our clients to be able to do that.
I'm going to give you your magic wand shortly, but before I do, I just wanted to pick up on that point you've made there, because I think one of the, and I'll use the word criticisms in the nicest possible way, of organisations like Resolution, like your Hampshire group, and I'm now also thinking with my Today's Media hat on, we're the publishers of a conveyancing publication and a wills and probate publication, and within both of those sectors there are organisations and membership bodies and kite marks, but there's very little public awareness of them. And so my point and my question, I guess, Grant, is how do the public know that they're selecting a lawyer that's going to behave in the way that you describe when they don't necessarily know what a resolution lawyer is? And how can we change that?
So I think it is raising public awareness. Now, I've mentioned earlier on our communications team at Resolution, and they do a phenomenal job. Obviously, I've talked a lot about sort of bulletins for the members, but they also make sure that every opportunity they get, if they can get a soundbite, whether it be on a radio show, whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's going out into the sort of media in terms of publications, articles, if we get a soundbite, we will sort of seize those opportunities. So I think that has helped raise the public awareness. When clients sort of perhaps search for us, just do a web search, they will come very early on onto the Trethowans site that we're all Resolution members with a description of what that actually means. But also then when I meet a client and say I'm instructed to write to their spouse or their partner, I will always carry a sort of standard paragraph that will encourage that person also to consult a Resolution member and just very briefly say what that's about. Resolution has a sort of very useful website, contains a lot of resource there. As with all websites, it's one of those that constantly needs attention, constantly needs to be refreshed. But we try and seize every opportunity. And I know other family lawyers do the same thing. Because I think what we're very keen to achieve is not just be seen as an organisation for our members, but as I say, an organisation that supports our clients and those families that are in sort of need. And as I say, using every opportunity to do that. I would say it's an organisation that puts its money where its mouth is. We really did bang the drum about no fault divorce. We will continue to bang the drum about sort of cohabitation reform and the various other things that come up in our vision. And as I say, when sort of then we get an interested party, whether that be in media, whether it be sort of on the political sphere, we really make sure that we seize those opportunities. We lobby, we sort of campaign, and we get involved in various activities. The organisation is also split into regions, as I mentioned earlier, on up and down the country. And those regions will do sort of various activities that sometimes are client-facing, not just client-focused. Therefore, it's all about raising awareness, using opportunities. At the end of the year, we usually have a sort of week dedicated to sort of a particular thing, whether that have been in the past no-fault divorce or sort of mediation or different ways of practice like sort of NCDR. All those things are given a lot of focus, but then we use, say, the media platform, because then that media platform is obviously important from a client's point of view. They get to learn a little bit more about what's this organisation really about. And I say it's not just a club to support one another. It's a sort of an organisation that's very much there for our clients, for their families, and as I say, really to help them steer through these difficult times.
We're heading fast towards the end of the podcast, Grant, but I promised you this magic wand. In all seriousness, you've been the chair of an organization that really champions change and have achieved a certain amount of it. What do you really feel the family law sector needs over the course of the next 1, 3, 5 years that would make a material difference to practice?
I was aware of this question coming up, so I was able to give it some thought in advance. And for me, I suppose if I was limited to 3, but I had the magic wand, firstly, clients getting early legal information and advice. There being sort of public funds available so that clients at all sort of spheres of life can access legal information and advice, because within that may sort of remove the need to issue court proceedings to raise the temperature, to raise animosity. There may be sort of other solutions, other means that can sort of drive matters forward. And so I think receiving sort of early legal advice information is absolutely key. And it was part of our manifesto in the Vision for Family Justice. And obviously with a sort of change in the sort of political arena, and I appreciate there's been other things going on, but I would really sort of want to champion that sort of be sort of piloted so that, say, clients can actually get the advice they need. Very swiftly, though, following on the heels of that, for me, is legal aid. I mentioned early on in my career, I was a legal aid practitioner. I haven't done legal aid public funding work for some years. I absolutely take my hat off to every single practitioner who continues to work as a legal aid lawyer. The role that they fulfill is they do my job, but with an extra dimension of sort of constant stresses and pressures, financial demands. And within there, my call on legal aid is, from the practitioner's point of view, proper remuneration rates. The fact that those rates haven't been sort of uplifted for so long, to me, that just cannot be right. They do a really difficult job. They deserve financial recognition for the difficult job they do. So for me, the solicitors, practitioners need to be properly remunerated. But the other side of it is a bit like my call for legal advice, early legal advice, is that clients deserve proper legal advice. They shouldn't be denied the access to justice. And as we stand at the moment, there are certain individuals or certain groups in society that miss out. They're not getting legal advice because they can't afford it, and there's not the proper sort of funding available. They can't get the resources they so desperately need. So for me, number 2 would have definitely been the sort of changes to legal aid, both in terms of who can get it, and practitioners being properly rewarded for a difficult job, because I say they do an amazing job up and down the country. And then number 3, and it's something we've touched on at various points during the podcast, is cohabitation reform. I would go as far to say there's probably not a practitioner out there who at some point in their career hasn't had to give really unpalatable advice to an individual. An example being somebody who's been, say, with their partner 25 years. The house is owned by that other partner in that person's sole name. They've not made a financial contribution to the property. Children that they may have had are now sort of out of education and they're going off and doing their own thing. And in that instance, sometimes you're saying to clients, there's no financial sort of recompense I can sort of advise you on. You haven't got an interest in the property. You're not entitled to maintenance. You're not entitled to a share of pension. You're not entitled to savings or investments that have been built up by that other person. And to me, that can't be right. If they were married, they would have had all sorts of various claims and various forms of relief. Because they have elected not to get married, that's entirely their choice. They shouldn't be denied those sorts of basics. They will have contributed to the household. They may have raised children and supported their partner in their career. There needs to be a change. And as I say, cohabitation reform, I think, is long overdue. And I know, as I said, I've mentioned him and the work, Graham, I've mentioned his work and the work of his committee. The current government have shown support within their own manifesto. Very early on in their manifesto, they talked about cohabitation reform. And early indicators to us are they're actually honouring that they're wanting to sort of see a change. And I hope whatever the political arena is, whether sort of our current government stay in power or not, I hope that this stays very much on the table, because to me, cohabitation reform, ensuring that people are getting the proper relief, is absolutely fundamental. So those are my sort of 3 key asks within the magic wand. I'm hoping that albeit the immediate past chair of resolution, I'm going to see some real sort of sea change, some real sort of developments there. I know that my sort of current chair, Melanie, will do a fantastic job supporting the regions and continuing to further the work of resolution, and will continue to bang the drum, certainly on those three key areas, and I have no doubt many others and many others beside.
Sadly, not in my gift to give, Grant, but fantastic to have you on the podcast. Thank you. That's as much as we've got time for. It's been brilliant to have you on, and I'm very, very grateful for your time. Thank you very much indeed for joining.
Thank you very much, David.
The Today's Family Lawyer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk. My thanks to Grant. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.